2024 seems to be a sequel of sorts to 2023 in that if you love AAA remakes of video games or independent developers doing cool things, then you're in for a good time. Balatro is a poker-based deck-building roguelike, and there's a reason why I said poker-based first instead of deck-building roguelike, because you're either not interested in deck-building roguelikes, or you're so interested that you've had enough of them by now. You play poker hands, and each poker hand gives you a score. Every round you have to reach or exceed a given score in a given amount of hands. You do that, you move on to the next round. You don't, you lose. Repeat until the numbers get so big they don't even fit on the screen. That sounds fun, I guess, but I should probably stop beating around the bush here. You already know this. Balatro has been incredibly successful both critically and commercially across a wide swathe of the video game community. From Let's Players to many of my peers to the audience that actually matters for some reason, the review section of the Steam store page. Yeah, don't worry game devs, I know all of the in-jokes. The question I want to ask is why? Don't get me wrong, Balatro is good, it's deserving of its success, it does a lot of things well, but roguelike deck builders in general do a lot of things well. A lot of the fundamental pieces of Balatro, while well executed, can be found in basically any roguelike deck builder that's out there. These are good games, you should try these games, especially if Balatro was your first one. I'm not even talking about the big hitters like Slay the Spire and Monster Chain, I'm talking about Cobalt Core and Wildfrost and Nitro Kid. You should play these games if you get the chance, and you'll realise that a lot of them are doing very, very similar things to Balatro. So this is gonna sound a bit mean here, but Balatro's main strengths have nothing to do with how quote-unquote good it is. First of all, while I'm making enemies of you here, it's a bit insidiously compulsive, no? There's just something about it, something about watching that number go up, something about the way the cards flick across the screen and make funny noises when scored, but the noises are different and they also increase in pitch slightly the higher they get, and there's flames. God, I love the flames so much, it ticks so many boxes in my brain. It's like, yes, this is good, you should keep playing. Honestly, if you are someone who struggles with compulsion, you should not play Balatro, at all. This is a conversation that came up surrounding Vampire Survivors, and I do think it's completely valid. I think it's bad if you shirk responsibilities to play video games. Controversial, I know. Be careful out there, don't hit this game too hard. There has to be some kind of happy medium between engaging players in your game and consuming them. If you're a game designer, there is no doubt a lot you can learn from the game's sound design and presentation, but maybe don't learn too much. But Balatro can only sink its hooks into you if it has hooks to begin with. On a more positive note, I think the main draw of Balatro is just how easy it is to understand. Okay, let's forget about Balatro for a second and look at this. This is Wildfrost, I mentioned it earlier, it's pretty good. What do you think you have to do in Wildfrost? It's a little bit intricate, right? You have to play these minion cards, and these minion cards have health, and they attack every now and then. And you have to beat the enemy minions with your own, and there's spell cards that you can buff your minions or damage their minions. Also, if your main guy dies, then you lose, don't let that happen. It's a fun, challenging game that feels great to slowly get better and better at, but it's also difficult to know what's going on at first. This is the most important thing on the screen. If this thing dies, it's game over. But it doesn't stand out in a sea of other stuff. It's also not apparent how your decisions everywhere else furthers the goal of making sure this guy survives the round. In fact, there's very little that you can do to make sure this guy survives that isn't just killing everybody as quickly as you can. But with Balatro, figuring out what you have to do is simple. You have to make this number go up as high as you can, and you have to make this number go up as high as you can. That's it, it's a pretty obvious goal. Anyone can understand numbers, you know what numbers are, right? It's not just that it's easy to understand, but every single decision you make funnels into these numbers in the purest of ways. You've got the micro of the rounds, finding the best poker hands. Do I discard here for a better one or just stick with the one I've already got? Then you have the macro of your overarching strategy, your combo. Do you go for the flushes, 2 pairs, straights? Do you value a consistent hand with a steady stream of score, or maybe opt for something a little riskier that pays off big time if it lands? This is all excellent crunchy decision making, and a big part of it is because it so obviously feeds into the goal of making the numbers go up. I don't think I've played a roguelike where I've spent so long staring at the shop. Outside of the boss blinds, there's very little speculation as to what you're going to be facing. It's always going to be a bigger number, it's just about how you get there. Balatro is essentially a reverse pyramid in its depth, or maybe an iceberg if I was trying to appease the algorithm. At the top you have the goal, make the numbers big, then everything below funnels into that goal. Making good hands, using jokers, building your deck, buying packs, upgrading your hands, employing proper Tao usage. The bottom here is really heady decision making, but players only do that once they've probably understood everything that comes above it. Balatro has essentially taken a genre that's known for both being fundamentally enjoyable but also rather complex, taken out that complexity and redesigned the whole thing to make sure it's fundamentally enjoyable. With the benefit of hindsight, it's no surprise that it's taken off like this. But to close out, I feel kind of weird talking about this game. Usually if I'm singing a game's praises, if I'm talking about Shadows of Doubt or Slipways or Sable, I'll say something like, I think games should be doing more of this. But here, it's like, well, more of what? It's not a mechanic or a feeling or a process, it's more of a design philosophy, and it's a design philosophy that may not appeal to everyone. Maybe it's because what Balatro does well is so closely tied with its commercial success. If I said that I wanted more games to do this, I'm basically going, hey developers, wanna make some money? Which feels a bit tone deaf in today's climate. So yeah, Balatro is there, it exists, it does a few cool things, it maybe feels a bit too compulsive. You've probably already played it, and if you haven't then you might like it, and if you have you should probably check out some other roguelike deck builders. That's about it, see you later.